Welcome into the Go Vols 24/7 podcast, a breaking news edition of the podcast. And this is not your ordinary breaking news edition. This is as massive of an edition of the breaking news portion of our podcast as we have had at Go Vols 24/7. I am Ben McKee, and I'm joined by Ryan Callahan, who is going to tell you why this is such a significant podcast we are recording.
Yeah, Ben. Tennessee has pulled. I'm not ready to say a shocker, but pulled off a big one and landed the number one wide receiver in the 2026 class. Tristen Keys, a five-star wide receiver from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, was committed to LSU for months and is now headed to Tennessee. Just a massive win on so many fronts. I'm sure we'll cover a few different layers of this one, why it's so big, but it's like I said, number one receiver in the class, a guy Tennessee's been after for a long, long time. Give them credit for staying on him. This was one back in March that people were, I think, people have kind of gotten tired of recruiting battles being, switch flips, and next thing you know, a battle that looked like it was headed your way, and suddenly a guy's going elsewhere. And I think Tristan Keys flipping or committing to LSU in March was an example of that for a lot of fans. Tennessee looked like they were in good shape. They had him on campus less than 10 days earlier. Now he's committed to LSU. What the heck? But give Tennessee credit. They were in good shape all along. The way things have played out since he committed to LSU have shown that. He made it back to Knoxville for an official visit in June. And Tennessee just kind of kept chopping wood, kept doing what they had done the whole time, did not change a thing about the way they had recruited him, remained confident in their connection with him, and kind of press all the right buttons in this recruitment and what was really what has been and what still might be down the stretch. Let's face it, a back and forth, tooth and nail battle for a coveted player. And obviously Miami and Texas A&M hosted him on official visits too. Tennessee, getting him toward the end of that official visit period in June. It's been a wild recruitment at times, and Tennessee comes out on top. And again, they may have to fight in the coming months just to hold on to him, but to get this one done at this point and to have the number one wide receiver in the class, in your class, to go along with the number one quarterback and number one overall player in the class, Faison Brandon, heck of an accomplishment by Tennessee and a major feather in the cap for this class. And certainly the future of Tennessee's wide receiver position, which already looked pretty good, is looking really bright with this addition.
Yeah, and this is one in terms of the reaction to the news is a bit weird because it is a shock to a certain extent. But for me, and I'm curious if you feel the same way, that the shock more comes from it took this long rather than it actually happened, because the talk coming out of his official visit was that he's about to decommit from LSU. That was probably the biggest shock, that he had not decommitted earlier in the summer, and Tennessee and Texas A&M were right there fighting tooth and nail for Tristen Keys, and just what his party had communicated to Tennessee. It was shocking that he remained committed to LSU. So I don't know. This is a weird one to put a bow on the shock or feelings or whatever towards the final destination, because I think, at least for me, the shock is more along the lines of it took this long for it actually to pop.
Yeah, it's that, but again, just the way he's handled this one the whole time. It's still taking the 3 more official visits in addition to the LSU visit. Like you said, going back to LSU the week after the Tennessee visit, that was kind of a twist that some people weren't sure would play out that way. So it's just one of those recruitments. I think of like a Ryan Wingo type recruitment. Just every time there's a number one receiver like this, or a number 2 or number 3 receiver even, and it's this many top programs involved, you know what it's going to be to land a player of this caliber. Receiver recruitments tend to be just a little more chaotic if it's a guy like this, and sure enough, this one ended up being just a back and forth battle, and it's still, in a way, is almost shocking that he's going. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Ben. There's definitely was reason to think it could happen in June, but it was also one of those recruitments where you weren't even sure he'd do it before his senior season, because this thing could play out all the way to signing day, and people have kind of assumed that all along, no matter what he did. But to go ahead and get this one done now, a big deal for Tennessee, and just a huge win for perception, for everything. I mean, Tennessee has been in some big time battles in this class, and no matter what else happens with anybody else, to be able to have again, assuming you get them all the way to the finish line, but the number one quarterback and the number one receiver in the same class is a heck of an accomplishment. And just to have a couple 5 stars, period, is an accomplishment. This would give Tennessee now 3 5 stars, whether you go by the 24/7 Sports rankings or the 24/7 Sports composite. Tennessee now has 3 5 stars in each one because you have Celeste Moa, who's a 5-star in the 24/7 Sports composite. Gabriel Osenda, the offensive lineman from Baylor School in Chattanooga, is a 5-star on 24/7 Sports. So to have 3 5 stars in the class and 2 of them be the number one quarterback and number one receiver, that's big time stuff reserved for big time programs. That is not something you do easily, and usually something that only an Alabama and Ohio State or maybe a Texas or LSU would have a shot at doing. So for Tennessee to be able to pull off something like that shows you how far they've come, shows you what they're capable of with all their resources, and shows you that they have done now that this staff's in year 5 under Josh Heupel. I mean, Faison Brandon kind of fell in their lap with the way they had recruited him to this point or to that point. And then Tristen Keys, very similar, just in a long time battle. And they're right up there with him. And after he committed to LSU, they just stayed the course and got it done. And for Tennessee to be able to pull that off is obviously a massive accomplishment.
Now, it's hard for the mind not to go immediately to Tennessee's recent Adidas deal and the fact that Tristen Keys is an Adidas athlete. What are your thoughts on those parallels? I mean, it surely is not a coincidence, and surely we are already seeing the benefits of that Adidas deal for Tennessee.
Yeah, I definitely would not discount that at all, and I think it's certainly worth noting that as Tristen Keys kept looking around this summer, he again took official visits to 3 other schools: Miami, Texas A&M, Tennessee. What do they all have in common? All Adidas schools as of July 21st. So that is certainly noteworthy. We've said it. I think Tennessee is going to benefit in recruiting from this Adidas deal, and certainly benefit in retaining players with this Adidas deal. So it is something that is you're going to see some tangible benefits to this, and I certainly would not discount that this might be one of those. So we will see how this plays out long term, but I think that partnership is off to a very good start either way, and I'm sure Adidas is happy with this, knowing that one of its Adidas athletes that they chose in high school is going to be playing at an Adidas school. They like it that way at the very least. Now we've kind of said this. There's some players who have Adidas deals playing at Nike schools and things like that. You're going to have some cross promotion sometimes, but I think Adidas wanting Tennessee to be a flagship school kind of for them, as we've talked about, you're going to want to be united as much as possible. So I think they're going to have deals with a number of Tennessee athletes while they're in school. And in Tristen Keys' case, they're obviously already partnered with a guy in high school that now is going to be playing at an Adidas school in college. So that is, Adidas loves to see that kind of unity in their advertising, and that's it's something Tennessee is certainly going to benefit from, I think, in a lot of cases. And this is one where I certainly would not discount that was something that helped Tennessee in this one.
Now, Tennessee benefits from its relationship with Adidas. How much did Tennessee benefit from Tristen Keys' relationship with Faison Brandon?
I think that definitely helped. I mean, that again, the chance to play with a big-time quarterback has always been appealing to a big-time wide receiver. And in this case, you got a couple guys with a relationship that took Tristen Keys to North Carolina last year before he went to Tennessee. He went to Greensboro, North Carolina to watch Faison Brandon play and hang out with him on a Friday night before they went to Tennessee the next day for one of the games he attended. So they clearly had a good relationship early in the process. They've stayed in pretty frequent contact all along. Now, I think, sure, he's had the chance to play with good quarterbacks at the other schools he was considering too. I don't think he thought quarterback was going to be a weakness at any school that he picked. But yeah, to have a guy that you really connect with, I was talking with him about his relationship with Faison Brandon. He said he's goofy. He's like a big child, talking about Faison. So they clearly know each other really well, talk all the time. Faison Brandon remained very confident throughout the process that Tennessee was going to have a good chance to end up with Tristen Keys. And yeah, I think they have talked a lot about the idea of Faison throwing passes to him in college, and they are excited by that possibility. So while I say all the time, and I think it's true, most kids are making their own decisions for their own reasons, and obviously you got to look at Tristen Keys, and he's got his Adidas deal and all these other factors to consider. So I don't think that's the number one reason he's going to Tennessee, but I think absolutely he's excited about playing with Faison Brandon, and that relationship definitely helped. And Faison Brandon continued to keep Tennessee in his ear, even though Tennessee's coaches were all over him. It's good to have that peer recruiting aspect too, so that a guy knows I'm going to go to this school and I'm going to like other people. And talking with Tristan Keys, he made it clear to me too that he's got good relationships with multiple guys at Tennessee that are even beyond the wide receivers. You know, he'd mentioned Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley, but he said, I know offensive linemen at Tennessee. I know linebackers and defensive linemen and stuff. He has a lot of relationships at Tennessee from visiting 4 or 5 times or whatever it's been over the past couple of years. And that's a big deal too. But Faison Brandon certainly at the top of that list, I think, among the relationships he has there.
We've talked about a couple of different reasons that Tennessee was able to land Tristen Keys' commitment. What do you think was the biggest one this summer to finally persuade him to flip? I know one thing. I don't know if this would be the answer to the question I just asked you in terms of what was the biggest reason, maybe aside from the Adidas partnership, but how much of a role did Kelsey Pope play in his recruitment? Because it does seem like that was a key piece as well.
Yeah, I think Kelsey Pope absolutely has been a big deal and has done a really good job of recruiting Tristen Keys and give him a lot of credit for, again, staying the course. Some guys, you don't know how to approach things after they've committed, and you can. I think coaches have realized that you can't get mad now when a kid commits to another school and say something bad, because hey, kids flip all the time, and now the transfer portal kids come back even if they don't go to your school out of high school. So he certainly wasn't going to do that anyway, but they maintained the same connection, and Tennessee continued to do a great job just staff wide. But Kelsey Pope was certainly at the top of the list there, staying in touch with him all the time and just continuing to do all the things they had done before he committed. And so their consistency and just the relationship there between Keys and Pope definitely helped. I think the people at Tennessee, Tristan Keys pointed to that, were kind of one of the main things that led him there. I think that's, again, the relationships with the players. It's relationships with guys like Faison Brandon, and it's knowing that you like the guy that's going to be coaching you at your position, and liking Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley for that matter as well. So I think there's a lot of factors, but Tristan Keys started off by pointing to the people. I think he, it's interesting. I think he sort of had some questions at times about Tennessee's offense earlier in the process for sure, and just sort of how they would prepare him for the NFL. And that's something I think they get some negative recruiting sometimes on that about the wide receiver position. But I think they did a good job of addressing those concerns and showing him they're going to do some different things offensively. I think they've done some different things already offensively, but I think they've done a good job of convincing him he can be a success at Tennessee. And basically the way he explained it, the guys they've had before that have been successes, they see him as such a talent. They think he's going to put up massive numbers. He's got his sights set on setting records at Tennessee. He thinks he's going to be big time in Tennessee's offense. So I think he like a lot of elite recruits, I think he kind of looks at it like, well, Jalen Hyatt, has kind of struggled to catch on with the New York Giants, won the Biletnikoff at Tennessee. He can win the Biletnikoff, I can set records. And so that's the way he's looking at it. That's just the way big time prospects tend to look at things. But yeah, I think they've convinced him he can have a great career at Tennessee and be the guy in their offense. I think that's one thing that some other schools maybe that he's looking at. LSU, he would just be the next really good receiver potentially there. I think at Tennessee, he has a chance to come in and be a star, be one of the faces of the program from day one, much like David Sanders, and Faison Brandon will be the same way. Just to have a chance to come in and be potentially one of the team's go-to options in the passing game as a true freshman. That's kind of what he's looking at. He basically described it to me as I can be the next Jeremiah Smith at Tennessee, even though he's not at Tennessee. He thinks he can have that kind of impact in Tennessee's offense. So I think the opportunity and a lot of things played into this. But yeah, give Kelsey Pope a lot of credit because I think he did a really good job with him.
5-star receiver Tristen Keys from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, has committed to Tennessee, has flipped his commitment from LSU to Tennessee, a massive addition for the Vols, and we still have plenty more topics to discuss and cover in the wake of his flip, and we will do so on the other side of this quick timeout here on the Go Vols 24/7 podcast. Welcome back into the Go Vols 24/7 podcast, a breaking news edition because 5-star wide receiver Tristen Keys has flipped his commitment from LSU to Tennessee. And before we jump back into our discussion, I do need to encourage you, wherever you find your Go Vols 24/7 podcast, whether that's on Apple, Spotify, elsewhere, if you wouldn't mind going in and leaving us a review. we would greatly appreciate that. And also, what else helps us in a big way is word of mouth. If you wouldn't mind letting your fellow Tennessee fans know that haven't quite found us yet, if you wouldn't mind letting them know about our content, about our podcasts. We record several throughout the week, each week, and that will only continue to pick up as we get into football season. If you wouldn't mind sending us in their direction, we would greatly appreciate that, because that also helps us in a major way. Now, Ryan, on a couple of these recruiting podcasts this cycle throughout the summer, we've had some fun conversations about, okay, which one's the most impressive recruiting win for Tennessee? And I think we've got like 1A, 1B, 1C with Braden Harmon and T.J. White and Faison Brandon and so on, or Braden Rouse, I should
Braden
say,
Rouse.
not Braden Harmon. I combined him with Jaden Harmon. Forgive me, those North Georgia boys. But is this like 1D, or does this take the cake?
I think this takes the cake. I just think anytime, I mean, look at what LSU has to sell at the wide receiver position. And that's, no knock on Tennessee or anything they've got to offer about their offense and their opportunity. But LSU doesn't need any help usually recruiting wide receivers with the, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, just go down the line. That's obviously pretty easy to sell to wide receivers and a player like Tristen Keys. And then you have to throw in the fact that he's from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. That's an area of Mississippi that LSU considers basically part of its home territory in recruiting. So you have a number one receiver in the country who's in your kind of home footprint for recruiting, and you land him in March going into his senior year. And then somebody comes in and flips him away. And so it's a devastating loss for LSU. It's an impressive win for Tennessee to beat out a program like LSU for a player of that caliber from there, especially, and to beat out Miami, Texas A&M, Alabama was a school that tried hard with Tristen Keys for a while, had some optimism at different times. That there are a number of programs that would love to have Tristen Keys. Pretty much anyone in the country would love to have a player like this. So to land someone of this caliber and to beat out those types of programs for him, hard to overstate that one. I mean, obviously the Faison Brandon win was impressive, but you almost take that one for granted because it was so early and because Tennessee was the favorite for him for so long. This one impressive because it's hard to flip guys sometimes. It just is. And there were even reports this summer of LSU having strengthened its NIL deal with Tristen Keys to kind of solidify things. I think they had some optimism that was going to take care of it. It obviously did not. So there was clearly more that went into it than that. And Tennessee was able to overcome all the things LSU had working in its favor. So they, I think they did a good job all along. And again, the crazy thing is that it didn't happen sooner in a way because Tennessee had some momentum a while ago and just kind of kept doing all the right things. And eventually it got across the finish line and they made it happen.
And I will add, not to steal any of the thunder, but just to add on and kind of summarize what you have been saying. But this is not a recruiting win for Tennessee just because of NIL or money. No. There are several areas of Tennessee football that Tristen Keys loves and is very comfortable with. And I think a lot of people close to Tristen was surprised when he committed to LSU. And from my understanding, sounds like it was an LSU visit where he was by himself and maybe got pressured before leaving the visit when they got him into a room. And that's kind of what led to his spur of the moment announcement. But this is not just, he's Adidas or NIL or whatever. This is not a money pickup for Tennessee. That's not the reason Tristen Keys is committing to Tennessee. He truly loves a lot of different things about Tennessee. Why is Tristen Keys? Or go ahead, and then I was going to ask you why is he a 5-star receiver? Is what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, well, so I was going to say we've said this too. Looking at Carnell Tate and some of these other guys who've gotten away from Tennessee, you're not going to win a battle. You're just not going to win a battle like that unless a player believes he can still be what he wants to be as an NFL prospect 3 years down the road or 4 years down the road. So to your point, Tennessee did a lot of things well, and you have to check basically all the boxes to win a recruiting battle like this one. They did a great job, and they had things working in their favor. But at the end of the day, if Tristen Keys didn't think he could get to the NFL and be an early first-round draft pick at Tennessee just like he could at LSU or somewhere else, he wouldn't be coming to Tennessee. So they did a good job of selling him on what he can do in Tennessee's offense and again, the relationships, the personalities with these guys. I think he clicks with a lot of people at Tennessee, including Kelsey Pope. So, I mean, he's he's a guy that's just a really good football player. You know, sometimes these guys are ranked really high, and it's because they've got, you know, 4.3 speed in the 40. They've got an enormous build. Tristan Keys kind of doesn't really fit either of those descriptions, but he's just a guy that always finds a way to make the play. He's got really good body control. He can go up and high point it really well. And he's got good kind of short area quickness too, I think. So even though I don't know what his 40 time would be. He's a good athlete. I'm not saying anything to suggest that, but he's not, you know, there was Arian Smith a few years ago, you know, that was ranked high based on his 40 time. You know, this is not one of those situations. So this is just a guy who's just a really good wide receiver. So I think it's as simple as that. He's you know, Andrew Ivins, in our official analysis of him on his 24/7 Sports profile, calls him a potential game wrecker on the outside. I mean, that's kind of all you need to know. This is just a guy that finds a way to catch most things thrown his way and has really good hands. And you know, again, body control is a big thing for me with wide receivers. I think Tristan Keys is really good with that. Really knows how to position himself to win a ball in tight coverage, and just finds a way to make a lot of plays. So I just think this is a guy that's got a potential to be a volume receiver, to be a threat in the downfield passing game. He can kind of do it all, and he does that without having to run a 4.3 40. He's just a guy that's going to has good football speed and is just going to get open and make plays all the time. And that's what you've seen from him in kind of all-star events. It's what you see from him, you know, with his high school team. And I fully expect him to continue that at Tennessee. It's one of those guys. He's ranked number one at wide receiver in his class for a reason. He's a guy a lot of people would be shocked if he's not a really good player in college.
Now, what does the addition of Tristan Keys mean for Tennessee's wide receiver class overall? It's a heck of a one in the country right now.
Yeah, it's a really good wide receiver class. And I say that knowing that at 24/7 Sports, we currently have a couple of these guys rated as 3 stars, but I've made it clear for a while I'm pretty high on Tyreek King locally. That's a guy that's just outside the top 100 in the 24/7 Sports composite. You've got Legend Bay, a really good athlete, quarterback in high school, who's going to play wide receiver in college. You kind of got some versatility with some of these guys in this class, because Celeste Moa, we've talked about, as a two-way athlete that could really legitimately play safety at Tennessee or anywhere else. So, but it sounds like he's going to play wide receiver at Tennessee, at least start off there. And then you throw in a guy like Tristan Keys to top it off, and man, this has a chance to be one of the best wide receiver classes in the country, if not the best. We'll see how it stacks up with others at the end of the day, but when you got the number one receiver in the class, that's a heck of a start. And so this takes what was already I thought a pretty good wide receiver class and makes it a really good one. So Tennessee was overdue for one of these, frankly. They've done it, you know, even without this. You know, I wrote it recently. Kelsey Pope has landed a top 100 player nationally at wide receiver every year he's been at Tennessee. Now, that includes Nathan Leacock, who did not work out, obviously, at Tennessee. And that includes Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley, 2 guys that got to show this year that they are going to live up to that kind of hype. And then you've got a young guy in Travis Smith, who was also a 24/7 Sports composite top 100 player. So you've got some guys that still have some things to prove, and Nathan Leacock didn't live up to the hype. But Kelsey Pope has consistently shown he can win these types of battles. But now to have one that's, you know, this big of a feather in the cap, a 5-star number one receiver in the country, that's taking things to another level. So this is one that obviously makes this receiver class look much, much better perception wise. Not, you know, you're not just, you know, taking a 3-star in our ratings like Tyreek King and saying he's got a chance to be really good, which I think he does. You're this is the guy who's undisputed number one in the class at his position, and has a chance to be a three and out type guy that could be an early first round draft pick. So huge upgrade for Tennessee's class. And when you get into the territory of having 3 5-stars in one class, what it does for the class as a whole too is pretty impressive. We'll see where the numbers shake out, but this is that the type of thing that gives Tennessee a much better chance of sticking in the top 10 and potentially having a consensus top 10 class by the time it's all said and done.
And I was going to ask you, big picture, what do you think this means for the perception of Tennessee's class and the perception of Tennessee's coaching staff's ability to recruit?
Yeah, I think this does a lot for Tennessee. I think for one, it gives immediate credibility to that Adidas deal. If anyone had any questions about it, you know, whether you want to say that was a big reason Tennessee won this battle or not, it's still, at the end of the day, you're getting an Adidas athlete who's already under contract with them, going to Tennessee. So it helps with that. But Yeah, just the perception of this class now, like I was saying, to have 3 5 stars, I'd have to go back and look. I'm not sure that's something Tennessee has done in the internet era. Even going by other sites ratings, I don't think Tennessee has ever had 3 5 stars in the same class certainly since the start of the 24/7 Sports Composite, which kind of retroactively goes back to 2000. I can't remember Tennessee having more than 2 5 stars in any class. So that would be really impressive if they can hold on to that. Obviously we got to see what the rankings do in the coming months, but to have 3 5 stars, either way you slice it, and then 4 players who have a 5-star rating somewhere, either in the composite or in 24/7 sports ratings, that's just an impressive depth at the top of this class to have that many guys who are highly ranked kind of anchoring this class overall. And yeah, again, that this opens up a lot more possibilities in the team rankings. It adds a lot of credibility to what Tennessee's doing. It obviously comes on the heels of Tennessee's first playoff appearance last year. So people, I don't think, will be totally shocked by this, but we kind of talked about it for a while. It can be hard to kind of chip away at the powers that have kind of dominated college football in recent years, the Georgias, the Ohio States, and to kind of get into that group. Texas is starting to get into that group now. LSU at times is kind of part of that group. You've got some other schools that can do it, but for Tennessee, you're starting to enter that conversation when you can pull off something like getting Faison Brandon and Tristen Keys in the same class. Not many schools have the resources and the respect to be able to pull that off. And for Tennessee to do that, I think it does kind of take the reputation to another level and start to show Tennessee's maybe really capable of competing for a championship, truly competing for a championship in a really competitive era of college football.
And hard not to love what Tennessee has done overall on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, any which way you look, I mean, there's playmakers and building blocks everywhere.
I mean, just look at what this roster could be next year, 2 years from now. You may have in a couple years. I mean, who knows how this quarterback competition is going to play out next year and what's going to happen there. But you could have Faison Brandon, potentially the number 1 player in his class. We'll see if that holds till signing day. Throwing to Tristen Keys, the number 1 wide receiver in his class, protected by David Sanders, who was either, depending on who you look at, the number 1 or number 2, or I think at the lowest number 3 offensive tackle in his class, but a guy who was rated very similarly coming out of high school. So just to have those 3 guys anchoring your offense potentially, I mean, that opens up a lot of exciting possibilities no matter what you're putting around those guys. So yeah, the way they're recruiting on the offensive side of the ball, we saw it on defense for a while. People kind of asked where the results going to come on offense. I think we're seeing it now, and obviously that opens up a lot of possibilities for the future that are pretty exciting when you look at where Tennessee's been offensively the last year or two. This gives you a chance to be right back up there, putting up the types of numbers you were, 2 or 3 years ago with Hendon Hooker.
For Ryan Callahan, I'm Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the Go Vols 24/7 podcast, a breaking news edition because 5-star wide receiver Tristan Keys has flipped from LSU to Tennessee.